Turning now to Puerto Rico. Nearly a week after Governor Ricardo Rosselló's messages were leaked, protesters continue to demonstrate outside of his home, demanding his resignation. The governor has yet to step down and has asked for forgiveness from Puerto Ricans. But many on the island refuse to accept his apology. Protesters are calling for more demonstrations later on today, and they've also planned a massive march on one of the island's biggest highways on Sunday. President Trump has responded to the situation, saying, quote, "A lot of bad things are happening in Puerto Rico," also saying Congress foolishly gave $92 billion for hurricane relief. The president also accused the U.S. government of being blind. He then compared the hurricane relief efforts between Texas and Puerto Rico. So with more on Puerto Rico now and the protests is Refinery 29 senior writer Andrea González-Ramírez. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you.
So I think for many of us, the governor of Puerto Rico really we only became familiar with him in the aftermath of the hurricane. And I, for one, was sort of surprised when I started to see these protests bubble up and the intensity. And, you know, many of the people on the ground say it's not about the leaked documents. This has been bubbling for a very long time. So let's talk about that. Sort of the most recent issue is history for Puerto Rico. You know, what are people upset about? What brought them to this point?
So in this leak chats, right, we had like this homophobic, sexist, like classist type of like remarks from not only Governor Ricardo Rosselló, but also some of his top officials. But also it kind of uncovered what people have known about top officials in Puerto Rico, but can never like really prove, right? It's like the chupacabra, like you know he exists, you might never see it. And it's that corruption is rampant, among this political class. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of anger about how he managed the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, how the government did not update the death toll, right? Like 3,000 Puerto Ricans or more died after Hurricane Maria because of the inept response of Governor Rosselló and President Trump. And what you saw was him just like keeping that 64 death toll for like nearly a year, right? So people are just tired of it. It's just this kind of like cathartic moment for the entire island. We're not seeing only protests in San Juan, we're seeing it like in small towns in the west and the south of the island. And you're also seeing like the diaspora here in New York and Texas and LA just protesting this. So I think it's kind of this thing that has been bubbling up between the debt crisis, the hurricane. Is just like at a boiling point for a lot of Puerto Ricans.
Right. You saw the president's sort of response, and it's something that we've heard from him before, sort of suggesting, you know, Puerto Rico was kind of messed up before the hurricane. Oh, you know, their electrical grid was a mess, and so now it almost suggesting, hey, thanks Congress, you just threw good money after bad. But can we talk a little bit more about the history of Puerto Rico as an island? It was initially a colony of Spain, and then later on, after the Spanish-American War, it became sort of under the domain of the U.S., but it has been getting sort of a raw deal for hundreds of years almost.
Yes. And Puerto Rico is the oldest colony in the world, right? Like it was invaded in 1493 by the Spanish, and then 400 years after that, it was invaded by the U.S. There's this group of cases called the insular cases that say that Puerto Rico belongs to, but it's not part of the U.S. And that's like the policy that we've seen from the federal government since then. There are things like the Jones Act, which requires that, you know, ships that carry goods to Puerto Rico first dock at like a U.S. port before they can be transported back to the island. So that means that the prices of goods are going to be increased, right? Like you have things like caps on Medicaid funds. You have things like Puerto Ricans on the island can vote on presidential primaries, but they cannot vote on the general election. So all these things obviously have contributed to some of the issues that the island has. Like, yes, the island is a messed up place because of this corrupt officials, but it is also a messed up place because of like this history and this legacy of colonialism for like over 500 years.
Yeah,
right?
There's a tremendous legacy. You know, I said to you that when I knew you were coming on, I started to sort of do a little bit reading myself because I realized how much I didn't know about Puerto Rico. And I know this is going sort of way far back, but I really never knew how Puerto Ricans were able to become citizens, but Puerto Rico is not a state. And that what I learned was it was because of World War I, and they wanted to be able, they didn't think that essentially Americans could fight in southern countries, and so they wanted Puerto Ricans to be able to fight, but not give them. So they gave them citizenship, really, just so they could fight and protect the Panama Canal.
Yeah,
that was it.
Puerto Ricans have been citizens since 1917, and yet I'm asked about my visa, for example, right? Like, Puerto Rican history is not taught in like a lot of schools, where for us back in the island, you're taught like American history since very early on. You sing the national anthem, you learn English in schools. So obviously it's like this very unequal relationship that's been going on for a really long time, and it's definitely contributed to like the state of the island today.
Okay, so let's talk today. Governor Ricardo Rosselló, his father was also in politics.
Yes.
His father also got into trouble because of corruption. What does the Rosselló name mean in Puerto Rico?
I mean, it is very weird, right? Like Pedro Rosselló, his dad was governor in the 90s. Like, so it was a time where, you know, the economy was flourishing. Like for a lot of people, he's a reminder of like better times where the economy was not screwed up. Puerto Rico has been in a recession for like over 10 years. So there's that, but there's also that legacy of corruption. He was never indicted for any crimes, but like nearly 24 of his officials were, right? Like his Secretary of Education, like Puerto Rico's current former Secretary of Education, Julia Kelleher, was just arrested last week. So it's a lot of like the same parallels. Ricardo Rosselló, the current governor, he was never in politics. Like, he was never an elected official before he became governor. And a lot of like the people who voted for him voted because he was a Rosselló, because people like were tired of also the pro-Commonwealth governor before him, right? So it's a strange legacy. Puerto Rico is like an extremely weird place. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, right? Like, he has 100 years of solitude, and he has this town called Macondo. Like, Puerto Ricans say like Puerto Rico is basically Macondo, like in many ways.
Right. So you live here, but you've also lived in Puerto Rico. Sort of, I want to ask you, you know, what do you want people to know about the island, and what do you hope the outcome of all these protests are?
I do hope that the governor does the right thing and resign, right? Like, when you only win with 42% of the vote in the last election, and then you're seeing thousands of people, not only in the island, but also diaspora, call for your resignation.
Because there were protests here in New York?
Yeah, there were protests here in New York and all over the world, China, Chile, like a bunch of places.
Wow.
Because Puerto Ricans are pretty much everywhere. So I hope he resigns, and I hope, like, you know, people watching on the mainland like asked us about our history, asked about how can you help, right? Like, a lot of times we see voices that are not Puerto Rican sort of like overtake the conversation. I hope that people, you know, read up on your own history. Like, the U.S. has been a colonizer for a long time. I hope that you learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Andrea González-Ramírez, thank you so much. I'm really happy you came by.
Thank you so much.